Hey everybody, my name is Danny and I'm from Board Game Sanctuary. Have you ever wanted to colour in, fill in, or even draw in your board games? Well, there's a whole genre of games out there called roll and writes, and in this video we check out my top 3 favourite thematic roll and write games that I've been playing this month. As always, please consider subscribing and let's get straight to the video. Hey dude, would you be able to do us a favour? Would you be able to pass me that sticky note? I'm trying to sort out and organise my board game collection. Welcome to is a beautiful flip and write game which transports players back to the 1950s as they take on the role of architects and town planners as they try to subdivide the land and build the most beautiful neighbourhoods possible. However, building the most successful suburb doesn't come without its challenges. Players will need to construct parks and also satisfy the residents that move in there in order to gain the most victory points possible before it turns into something like Wisteria Lane out of that TV show Desperate Housewives. So what you'll do at the start of the game is you'll take the little pad of suburban streets and you'll distribute one per player. I've actually laminated a couple of my sheets so that in future when I run out of paper I can actually reuse these laminated sheets by using whiteboard markers. Just a little home thing that I've done, but it means that the game will last for a lot longer. And you then place out a contract card, one from each of the different categories. There's all number 1, number 2, and number 3, and you flip them to the side, which shows you both scoring numbers. This number means whoever finishes at first gets 8 points, whoever finishes at second gets 4 points, and then you flip it over when the first player claims the card. And if you have a player that completes all 3 contract cards, that triggers the end of the game, and that's one way the game can end. So in Welcome To, players are all essentially playing the game simultaneously, writing numbers and triggering effects all at the same time. Across each round, each card will be flipped over, and it will reveal a number and a special bonus effect. And basically what players will need to do is they'll need to choose a pair. So a player could choose the 11 and the park effect, the 8 and the bis effect, or the 15 and the fence dividing effect, and choosing one pair to apply into their neighborhood. This creates for some really interesting decision making, because do you choose the pairing because of the number that you need to fill up the row in your neighborhood, or do you choose it to simply try and get the advantage of the effect in improving your neighborhood overall? The numbers are super critical because this is where the crux of the game occurs. If you can imagine these empty neighborhoods being 3 different rows, players are essentially going to be placing numbers on each of the houses in ascending order. Now they don't have to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they can go like that, but they could go 1, 3, 6, 7, as long as the numbers go from lowest to highest. Now you'll notice that the 3 different empty neighborhoods are in different lengths, meaning that you could probably skip a lot more numbers in this row, but in this row you're probably going to have to go up by 1s or 2s in order to completely fill that row. The other thing you're going to be doing is you are going to be subdividing the neighborhoods, and that's how you fulfill contracts. So when you have 2 or 3 houses that are filled up, and then you take the fence effect, you can then subdivide that neighborhood and build little established blocks. And those blocks will then match up with the blocks on the contract card. So this is a block of 3, a block of 3, and a block of 3. As you can see here, this is a subdivided block of 2. These are 4 separate subdivided blocks of 1. This is a block of 5. So this is what your sheet will kind of essentially look like at the end of the game. I've obviously gone in and written little funny things that the neighbors are saying on my sheet. Along with the different numbers that you get to pick throughout the game, there are 6 different bonus effect cards that can trigger as well. Navigating all of these extra effects is actually super simple because everything is summed up beautifully on one sheet. This whole section down here on your card will net you positive points at the end of the game, and this red section here will net you negative points, so you'll lose points if you have any numbers written down here. The park cards allow you to add some extra greenery to those drab streets. First of all, if you're resolving the park effect, basically what you do is whichever row you place your number in, you then cross off the leftmost number of this little row here above your neighborhood. And so by taking the park action more often in this longer row means that by the end of the game, if you cross off these 5 numbers, you'll be able to get 18 points. The pool manufacturer bonus effect allows players to score extra points for those residents who wish to build a pool in their house. If you take the pool action, you're then going to place a number, and if you place a number in a house that has a pool in it, you circle the pool and you cross off one of the numbers here, and the more pools that you construct, the better your end game scoring point for that category will be. The temp agency card allows players some extra flexibility as to how they number their houses in their street. Every time you take a temp construction action, basically this action allows you to add 1 or 2 numbers to your house number. So meaning, for example, if I wanted to place the number 8 and I only had the number 6, I could add 2 to the 6, take this action and put the number 8 into my street. The real estate agent allows you to promote and increase the value of certain completed housing estates. This is a really important section because this determines how much you're going to score for each block of houses that you build by the end of the game. So if you've got a block of 6, the more you cross off here, the value of that block of 6 is going to increase with the more times you cross off the numbers in each of the columns. For example, if I build 3 blocks of 3, and I've used this real estate agent action a couple of times, I could cross off these 3 numbers, meaning that my 3 blocks of 3 could be worth 6 each rather than 3 each at the end of the game. This card allows a player to duplicate any house number on a street. You might find yourself in a situation where you can't fill in a house between 2 houses simply because that number doesn't come up, or maybe because there is no number in between. For example, you might have gotten 9 and 10, and then you've got a gap in the middle. This bis action allows you to create a duplicate of it. So you could go 9, 9 bis, and 10. So that would allow you to fill in that gap and complete that block. But you do take negative points at the end of the game for every time you use it. Now, if you get really stuck in a game of Welcome To, twice throughout the game you can use the roundabout action, which basically allows you to cross off one of these circles, and it allows you to split your street into 2 separate streets. So you can place a roundabout here, split that into its own street, and split the rest of it into its own street as well, meaning that you can then start from 1 again and then go in ascending order. Now, if at any time you can't place a number, you do have to color in one of these stop signs, and if you do it 3 times, the game is over and everyone has to add up their points. What I really like about Welcome To is the theme. The theme really draws me in, and I really like how they've married the mechanics of numbering houses in a neighborhood that you're developing and subdividing it into this beautiful theme. They could have easily gone for something really dry where it's like fill in a number in the row and get these bonus effects, but I like how they've tried to incorporate the elements of building a neighborhood into the mechanics, the effects, and turning this really dry element of putting numbers into spots into something a little bit more engaging, and I really love that. I like how the decisions that occur in this game are incredibly focused. Players really only have 3 choices, but that is a little bit deceptive as well, because once you've made your choice and you look at your map opens up all these other possible choices and thought processes that your brain has to go through. So you're not just picking a number 10 and crossing off a park, you're then picking that number 10, thinking about where in the 3 neighborhood rows you're going to place that number 10, because if you place it too high, that will block out spots for future numbers from 11 to 15. If you put it too low, you might not be able to fit all the other numbers that come up. And then which row do you put it in? Do you put it in that really long row and try and score more park points by the end of the game, or do you put it in the short row? The fact that the small choice of drafting the particular cards that you want for your neighborhood then creates branching decisions that kind of multiply on top of each other on every turn just really makes this game so innovative, but also interesting as well. Another element that I really admire in the game is the way that the cards flip over. You can anticipate what sort of bonus effects are going to be coming up, but also the combination of numbers married with the different bonus effects is one that is quite unpredictable, and it means that you're going to have to adjust your strategy and tweak it as you go. Cartographers is a brilliant flip and write game where players are going to be exploring the northern lands, all with the hope of reclaiming it in the name of the Queen. Players are going to be traveling across 4 different seasons and exploring multiple terrains, including some ancient ruins, and gaining some important coinage on the way. If players can satisfy the Queen's requirements to the best of their abilities, they can maximize the amount of renown that they earn and be declared the best cartographers in the kingdom. So, throughout a game of cartographers, players are going to be looking at which season it is. So if it's the first round of the game, you'll be playing with spring, and basically looking at the letters underneath the season and seeing which 2 scoring objectives will score this round. So at the beginning of the game, players are going to start off with a brand new blank sheet. They're going to write their cartographer name and their title, and if so, you might want to fill in this cool little emblem for thematic flavor. One player then draws the card off the top of the exploration deck and places it face up so everyone can see what terrain players are able to build this turn. So players could either build a T-shaped forest or a T-shaped water. Now I've got to decide which terrain I want to draw and where I want to place it on my map. Keep in mind that if you ever surround a mountain completely, you get a coin or an extra point at the end of every round, and there's a little coin track at the bottom that you can cross off. And at the end of every round, however many coins are crossed off is how many points you get. And there are 4 rounds in the game. So I might draw my T shape over here. So I'm going to go water. Now keep in mind, you also want to be satisfying this season's objective as well. And a season ends when you get exploration cards with a timestamp that equals or exceeds this value in the corner. And so far we've only satisfied a total time value of 2, so we've got a little bit more time to explore. Now the reason I placed my marshlands around that mountain is so that I can try and maximize the amount of score that I get from this adjacency effect. So hopefully at the end of this season I'll be able to score 8 points altogether, 2 points for each adjacent water space. Then the player flips over the next terrain card and then applies its effects. So here, each player will draw or fill in 1 square, but it can be any of the 5 terrain types, including a goblin. And so after that turn, players reveal the next card, and it is a ruins card. When a ruins card appears, you draw the next card, and basically, whatever card comes up next, players will need to fill in that particular shape on top of a ruins icon on their map. So for example, here, there are some ruins icons printed on the page. I would need to build a village shaped like this or this that covers one of those ruin spaces. Okay, so that way I've satisfied that ruins card. If you can't place your piece over a ruin space, you must place a 1x1 terrain piece anywhere on your map. So I guess the downsides of that is you're not filling up as much space if you're restricted to placing a 1x1 square, whereas here I'm filling up that whole entire area, which will satisfy objective C that is currently up here, which is called the Wild Holds, where if you have a cluster of 6 or more villages next to each other, you get 8 victory points. If you ever reveal an ambush card, players all have to pass their map in clockwise order to the person next to them, and basically that person then places or draws this particular pattern of monsters on their map, and basically they'll score negative victory points at the end of the round if they are not completely enclosed by other spaces or terrain spaces. This is a mechanism that's incorporated into the game to really drive player-to-player interactivity. If there's a player that's so far in the lead, players can use this and exploit this card to try and make their puzzle a little bit harder. I really love these cards because it adds some really interesting puzzly elements to the game that you have to work around when you get your map back in return. At the end of the game, you should get a map that looks somewhat like this, filled out as much as possible. Whoever has the most victory points by the end of the game will win. One of the elements that really piqued my interest in cartographers was the fact that you could build your own world. Now, I'm a huge fan of world building and drawing my own fantasy maps, as well as building a lore around the world that you've constructed. Even so, I've also got a little book here that I'd like to share with everyone of some of the drawings that I've done just in my spare time as a hobby. I've created my own fantasy realms in this world that I call Turunga. This game just really taps into that element of world building and creating your own place to escape to, especially with the way the world is at the moment. You know, using fantasy drawings and creating fantasy worlds is such a great way to escape the hecticness of real life. The mechanics that I really like in this game is the freeform nature of where you can actually place a lot of the terrains that appear. So if you unveil, for example, a forest terrain, the card itself will give you two options, and being able to pick the particular shape that you want that fits best in your vision of what your world will look like, or the world that you've explored, is beautiful. It gives players a lot of ownership, a lot of openness to the sort of map that they actually want to build. I also like the fact that at the end of the game, you can take this world map that you've created and use it in a D&D campaign or a homebrew if you really want to go that far. And pairing this up with the other game, Role Player, by Thunderworks Games, can marry those two experiences together really well. You can build a character using Role Player and then take that player or that character into a world that you built in Cartographers, and that is brilliant. And for those who don't know what Role Player is, it's basically a character creation game where players are using dice to build up the stats for a particular character that they could potentially use in a D&D campaign. Railroad Inc. is a roll and write game which pits players against each other as they try to build the most efficient rail and road network route of all. Players will be rolling these dice as they lay down highways and railroad tracks to try and connect them to the exits on the edge of their player board. The players who do this most efficiently will win the game and be declared transport extraordinaires. So in a regular game of Ink Road Challenge, you only need to use these 4 white dice. But if you're playing with the expansion, especially the river expansion, you're going to need these 2 dark blue dice. And if you're playing with the Lakes expansion, you'll need these 2 light blue dice. So on the player board, you've got this main grid, which features all of the different exits. So you've got a road exit, railroad exit, road exit, and it kind of alternates all the way around. You've got this central space, which gives you additional points at the end of the game if you draw in them. You've got this little grid up here, which shows you the 6 different bonus dice actions that you can take, and can take up to 3 throughout an entire game. And this little row here shows you all the different possibilities that appear on the white dice. And at the end of the game, this is where you'll write your score. Any errors or unfinished routes, you'll lose points, and clusters of networks that are connected to more exits will yield you more points by the end of the game. If you're playing the base game, there's only going to be 7 rounds, but if you're playing with an expansion, you'll only be playing 6 rounds. And how you play is, at the beginning of the round, you roll the dice, look at the 4 different symbols, and starting from any exit or pre-existing established route, you're going to draw these particular shapes onto your map. And the aim here is to try and make sure that your route connects to as many exits as possible. This can be quite challenging because if you've got a piece like this, pieces that have extra exits open up extra branches that need to be fulfilled and connected before the end of the game. So if you do choose to use one of these bonus crossroads, I guess you could call them, then you have to find a way to seal off those crossroads by the end of the game. Otherwise, you will incur penalty points. So for example, on here, what I might do is I've got this little T road. I might just use the T road in this way to draw a T road like that onto my map, and I write down this is round 1, so I write the number 1. I've used that, and you can kind of rotate these dice so that you can fit them in the way that you want to fit them. So then I might then use this piece here, which turns that road into a connection or a railroad, and then I might use this L-shape railroad to connect it like that. And then my final piece, I might use this railroad over here to start a new rail line down below. Now, at this point, I might decide to use one of these bonus crossroad actions, and you can only use 1 per round and a max of up to 3 throughout an entire game. It's probably better to use these a little bit earlier on because that gives you more of a chance to try and connect and complete the networks. But sometimes I use them in the late game to try and finish off roads that need to be connected to exits. And at the end of the game, you should have something that looks like this. And the numbers represent the different rounds in the game. I've written my score here, and you can see here, you get points for the exits in each cluster. And if the more exits you have, the more points you get. You also get points for the longest road, the longest railroad that you have on your map. And you get points for each square that you have drawn a part of your network in that is in the central part of your board. And that will give you a total score. Now, the beautiful part of this game is that you don't know what is going to appear on these dice. So as you're planning your route and as these options come up in front of you, you're constantly trying to work out what is the most efficient way of getting your connection to the edge of the board. And trying to reach the edge of the board is both a geographical, navigational, and puzzly challenge. And this is what makes this game brilliant. Sometimes you might spend 2 or 3 turns just sitting there thinking about, should I place it here? And then you might experiment by pre-drawing your route to the side of the board and going, actually, no, that is probably not the most efficient way to get there. There is just a beautiful sense of choice and scope of choice of how you're going to use the pieces in the most advantageous way. And just because everyone's using the same dice doesn't mean the maps are ever going to end up being the same. So this was my opponent, this was mine. Obviously they crushed me with 58 points. What I really love about Railroad Inc. is the fact that it's such a light and portable game that you can easily throw it in your backpack and take it on a holiday or on a road trip. I really like the fact that this game has this beautiful puzzly element to it where you can build your road, and that little transport network that you're starting to establish needs to find its way to multiple exits. And the use of these bonus actions, you've got up to 3 per game, these little bonus pieces, will often help you in situations, but then create more open branches that you'll need to then close off before the end of the game. I like how your map evolves as you play the game, and trying to search for all the different ways to score is really crucially important to winning the game. So sometimes you might focus on trying to just build a really long road, but then also link it up to your railway network. And then sometimes you might try and exploit this center part of the board, which gives you additional points as well. Then I like all the different strategies that you kind of encounter and uncover as you play it more often by hooking different exits together and trying to just use the shapes in the best way possible. And so, what is your opinion on roll and write games? If you really like them, don't forget to smash the subscribe button. If you really hate them, don't forget to hit the like button. Thank you for joining me for another Board Game Sanctuary video. I look forward to seeing you again in the near future. And don't forget to make sure your next game is an amazing one. Goodbye.